This podcast is part of the Game and Entertainment Network. Visit tgenetwork.net to find the latest episodes from all our shows.
It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Agronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again, time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 132. Tonight I'm joined by Grace.
Hello.
Kodra.
Hi.
Tam.
Hello.
And Thalen.
Cthulhu Fatan.
So yeah, that's a thing. Tonight we are finally getting around to recording the Cthulhu episode that was our October game of the month, and now halfway through November game of the month.
Yeah.
Thalen, or actually this is Kodra's pick, isn't it?
No, this is me, yep.
Yeah, Kodra, tell us a little bit about this game.
So this is a game that was released back when I was in college, like in 2006, I think. And it was a Xbox original game. So, it has been since ported to the PC, though. Released by Bethesda, and I had just been in the midst of playing Morrowind, so I was willing to give anything by Bethesda a try. Didn't realize that it was published by Bethesda, not made by Bethesda. But it was a really fun horror game, and I had never really played a horror game that I enjoyed before. And this was October, so I figured I'd have us play this game. And what I didn't realize is how bad of a port it was.
That is most definitely a thing. So, like, in theory, I could probably excuse myself from recording this because I never actually got very far at all without it crashing.
So I could also, in theory, excuse myself from recording this because I discovered that this game is the first game I have ever experienced that made me violently ill from motion sickness. Like, I've heard other people talk about this and thought, oh, that sounds bad. And now I have the utmost sympathy for people who can't play certain games because of motion sickness, because I have never experienced such a horrible thing.
I am in the exact same boat. I also had never experienced serious like any kind of motion sickness from games, even like virtual reality or anything.
But this game did it for you?
This game absolutely did it for me. Like,
yeah.
That's no fun.
That's really awful, and like I feel bad about recommending this game at this point.
Well, it was frustrating because I was enjoying myself playing it and was like, oh, I kind of feel kind of crummy. I don't know what's going on. And I kept playing and I just felt worse and worse, and suddenly dawned on me like, oh, maybe I should stop looking at the computer for a minute.
So one of the things, like, okay, before we actually get into this game, like, this week I was thinking, man, should we just, like, put a moratorium on any of the weird transitional FPS games?
I mean,
but then it dawned on me that, like, really, that's where a lot of the interesting games that did something other than Call of Duty lie, is in that weird
FPS
period.
It's also something else.
Right,
Yeah.
like, those just don't exist that much anymore. Like,
Yeah, in this case, it's like an FPS that is kind of a stealth adventure game.
it's and like emphasis on the adventure.
Yeah, like I feel like this would have been a better game if it was just an adventure game, because the stealth could get really, really annoying.
yeah, so, like, I really can't comment much on this game because I have played the intro 5 times, and every time it crashes out at the same place. And I tried to install the unofficial patch, and I deleted the game entirely and re-downloaded it again and followed the guide to install the patch step by step, thinking maybe I screwed up and forgot a step. And no, it just won't run on either my desktop or my laptop. And unfortunately, like, all of my machines are now Windows 10, so I don't have anything older to try it on.
Huh. See, I've had it crash a couple of times on me, but mostly it's run just fine for me, and I'm on Windows 10. I swapped out the executable and installed the unofficial patch, but that's all I did.
So where it crashes for me, like clockwork, is when you go through the first house, like when you first start the game, and you find the guy you were looking for, and the cops like start firing on him or whatnot.
Right.
And then it just crashes out. So,
literally at the very beginning.
Literally at the very beginning. So, I got to roam around a house with some very square doors, but that's about all I have to tell you. Which is really sad because, like, I love the story that this is based on. I'm a big H.P. Lovecraft fan. I really wanted to play this game, and I guess I should have just tracked down the original Xbox 360 version. Like,
Not
I think
Xbox 360.
Xbox.
Oh, Xbox? Oh,
Yes.
God. Okay, yeah, no, then there's no way I could have played this.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I kept thinking. So I had a lot of crashes. I powered through. I did not quite get to the end, but I got to the last level.
Okay, I got to the refinery raid.
Okay.
So a decent ways in.
Yeah, you got a decent ways in. A little under halfway.
I had less trouble with it crashing and more trouble with I tried to be stealthy and would be seen and end up having to go back to my last save. And I cannot count the number of times that I ended up giving a dude a dead rat and watching him eat it and then bash his brains out on the bars of a prison cell.
Oh, right. Like, okay, so yeah, this is a game where it, at least for the first half of it, asks you to be very stealthy. But if you fail your stealth, you can run to, like, the next area, get hidden, and reset.
Yeah, or find an elder sign if you happen to know where one is.
Yeah.
Because, as they should, elder signs repel, mythos creatures. So when these tainted Innsmouth people round the corner to an alley with an elder sign at the other end, they throw their hands up in front of their eyes and back away, and then you can bash their brains out with a crowbar.
Yep. I know exactly where you're talking. I sequence broke that area so hard that the game broke. I actually had to restart that entire... I had to go back to the previous level because I lost my autosave at the start. And I had to get back to that point.
A couple of times, yeah.
Because I just ran into that entry room where the guns are. I bashed the guy's brains in with a crowbar there, took the guns, and just started going to town.
See, I actually did successfully stealth my way through that. It took multiple tries, and got out of Innsmouth, and met J. Edgar Hoover under, less than wonderful circumstances.
J. Edgar Hoover's awful.
J. Edgar Hoover is an asshole. We already knew this, though. And then started trying to be stealthy on, in the refinery, and finally decided, you know what? I've got all of every type of ammo that I can carry, and I have some guns. Fuck a lot of this. I'm going to shoot people in the head. And funnily enough, that worked a lot better.
It is very effective. Yeah, so after you get a gun, you're supposed to start using that gun.
Yeah. I finally decided that the refinery just wasn't built for stealthing around in.
Yeah,
and there's very little. A lot of the things that we're used to stealth games having to telegraph things to you aren't there in this game. I'm still not entirely certain how far they can see and how dark is dark enough for them not to see you, and if movement matters. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure any of that actually matters other than conal visions checks.
Yeah. Well, and also this is a strange game in that the crouch button and the stealth button are two different buttons. It took a little before I realized that.
Yeah, I didn't ever use the stealth button. I felt like that was a trap.
It makes you very, very slow. But it does also make you go unseen in places where if I wasn't stealthed, I would be seen. So, I mean, it does appear to make a difference.
Oh, I didn't. I guess I never bothered trying. It was always this is way too slow.
Yeah. But mostly during the portions before the jailbreak where you don't have any weapons. There were some places where I just could not get past. They kept seeing me and they kept seeing me. And finally, I was looking around at I was looking at the keybinds for some reason, and I realized that there was a separate stealth button, and tried using that in a couple places, and it made the difference. So did so did anybody besides me and Kodra make it even through that initial house?
I made it through the initial house. I made it to Innsmouth, I guess, and started doing some exploring. But that's one of my complaints is that, you know, now with more modern games, we take various styles of saving your game for granted. And one of the things that was frustrating to me is that I would play for a little while until I started feeling sick, and there was no way for me to save to come back. And so I would
Yeah.
have to start over at the beginning of that section, and it was just, you know, I didn't know where I could go to find something that would let me save, and I couldn't continue because I was feeling too crummy. So that was sort of where I threw up my hands. I tried a couple times to get through that section and just couldn't make it past or to a save point before I felt too bad.
Well, and that was a big part of the problem that I had was like, I just finally gave up. After having like 5 crashes in the same spot, like, I didn't know what more I could do to brute force through it. And I tried lots of different, run as Windows 7 compatibility mode, run as Windows 8 compatibility mode, run as administrator, and nothing really seemed to make a difference.
That is disappointing.
It's super disappointing because, like, I remember when Kodra initially said this game, like, ages ago, that was on his list, I was super excited because, like, I had always meant to play it, but never got around to playing it.
Yeah, I really want to finish this game because, I mean, the story of this game is absolutely my jam. I mean, right now I'm playing through the raid on the Marsh Refinery by the FBI, which is an important event in Mythos history. I mean, it's mentioned in the story, and then the raid on Innsmouth directly resulted in the creation of my absolute favorite Cthulhu Mythos thing ever, Delta Green, which is the government conspiracy that deals with handling, Cthulhu Mythos stuff.
So that was the thing. I have heard. I actually haven't read all the way through Shadows over Innsmouth. I hear it is actually very faithful to that story.
So this game, at least the first portion of it, starting with you reaching Innsmouth and up to and beyond the place I'm in now, is basically a direct adaptation of the Call of Cthulhu adventure module, Escape from It, which is based on Shadow over Innsmouth. But like the whole thing with the manager of the grocery store, disappearing, being the thing that brings you in, all of that's straight out of the module. Like when I was talking with a friend of mine about this game and was telling him about, what had happened so far, he's like, "Oh yeah, I've got that adventure module. Do you want to read it?"
That's awesome.
I don't think the Yithian element is in the module. I think that's added on, and I don't know where that goes to. But I mean, getting into the basement of the house and activating a portal, and oh, here comes some of the Great Race out of a portal, was that was the moment where I decided that this was a game that I really wanted to play.
So, I mean, it is your time with the Yithians is why you are transporting your vision. You have those visions, right?
Right. It makes sense because for anyone who doesn't know how the Great Race works, they are time travelers, but they time travel by swapping their minds with beings in the time that they want to travel to. So basically think Quantum Leap if Sam Beckett were a horrific, multi-limbed conical monstrosity. And that happens to you at the end of the prologue. And for 5 or 6 years, a Yithian was piloting your body.
Yep. And they talk to you throughout, you hear whispers in your head and voices talking to you about what's going on.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, because as they come, the Great Race are one of the most benevolent of the Mythos beings. They just want to learn more about our time. I mean, admittedly, they've committed genocide by replacing an entire race en masse, but it wasn't humanity. So I guess there's that.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that are going on with this game that I find interesting. The sanity mechanic is basically whenever you're dealing with like usually something that is incomprehensibly like should not exist inside of this world that you understand, you start to take a sanity hit. And as you take a sanity hit, like that's when your character's vision starts to blur. You start to hear voices. There's some distortions. There's a lot of distortion in the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And if it gets too bad, like it is a way for you to die. And the way for you to regain sanity is to not look at anything crazy. So for the most part, you are going into like it feels like it does a good job of encouraging like the stereotypical go into a corner and like just calm your nerves, hide away from this world that doesn't make sense for a little bit.
Yep, exactly how you should play Call of Cthulhu. Don't look at things. It's a bad idea.
Never read the book.
Never.
Did you? So you were in the Marsh Refinery.
Yes.
Did you find out what's underneath the Marsh Refinery?
I have not yet. I've made it to a grinder that a federal agent fell into, and then the save point right after that was is what I had reached when we were getting ready to start. I mean, I have some guesses as to what might be under the Marsh Refinery, given what I know about, the Deep Ones and Innsmouth and so forth.
So what are you thinking?
Well, there's this dude named Dagon.
You meet him later.
Okay. I know there's a Shoggoth somewhere under Innsmouth, so...
That's what's in the Marsh Refinery.
Oh, lovely.
And, like, that's a really awkward thing where you're... So, the other thing is that there's a lot of jumping puzzles and, like, old adventure game puzzles where you're finding inventory items and you're managing those, and you're taking those inventory items and combining them with each other to solve puzzles. Mm-hmm. Only when you're solving, and that's how you like ultimately are defeating the Shoggoth. You're solving a puzzle, but you're solving a puzzle while like also going crazy because there's a Shoggoth in the room with you.
Right. Yeah, because you can't really shoot a Shoggoth. I mean, you can. It just doesn't do anything.
You do shoot at Dagon.
Well, bullets could theoretically have an effect on Dagon.
This is
if you used enough of them.
This is more of...
I'd prefer, like, a rocket launcher.
This is the cannon on the bow of a ship.
Okay, yeah. Cannon is good. Cannon could work.
Well, Father Dagon is at least of our plane, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he's not, like, immune to all weaponry. He's just, big and scary and ugh.
But the other thing I had forgotten is, like, it is very adventure gamey in that you can wander around and you can inspect stuff and that you'll get a little bit of a dialogue.
Yeah, lots of looking at things and finding journal entries and stuff, overhearing people talking and learning things from that.
This game reminds me of, this game does remind me, like, of all of the FPS, weird first-person shooters from this era where they were definitely trying something different.
Yep.
But what it also made me think of as I was playing it and as I was crashing to desktop and as I was hearing about Bell's unplayability issues and as I was hearing about, like, the FOV issues that Tam was having, and this is a game that was really poorly ported to the PC. I didn't have much of these issues when I played it on the original Xbox. Certainly didn't have the crashes or the instability issues.
Well, there's honestly like a bunch of games from the PS2 Xbox era that got ported to PC and done so badly. I'm looking at you, God, what's the Star Wars game? I'm drawing a blank where you're playing like Starkiller.
Oh, The Force Unleashed?
Yes. Force Unleashed on the PC is absolute garbage. Like, the controls just don't work, and
I had forgotten that it was ported to the PC.
Yeah, no, like, the controls just don't quite work right. And it crashes a lot. But like, there's this whole era of games that I think they decided, oh hey, we can make money by selling them to another platform, and they just don't quite work right.
It makes me realize that there is an issue of games archival that, like, for most of the popular games, you're gonna at least have people trying to do competent remakes and ports. But for a game like Call of Cthulhu, which was admittedly decently well received critically, but ultimately not very financially successful, it's kind of relegated to the dustbin of history.
I mean, it's clearly got enough cult following for someone to do an unofficial patch of it, but it's not like hugely popular.
But that unofficial patch is of questionable efficacy itself.
Right.
Well, and if you remember correctly, when we played Tron 2.0, like, there was a lot of weirdness that didn't go away until we installed that unofficial patch.
Mm-hmm.
And that's absolutely a game of the same era.
Yeah, I guess that's what I kind of was concerned of, is like, is there going to be a whole lot of games that we're just going to no longer be able to play? Like, they're going to be lost to time. And, like, it's happening relatively quickly compared to other mediums.
So, I'm not necessarily sure that's true. There's as film technology advanced very, very quickly, as during its early inception, and it went through like multiple hardware iterations, early film is gone.
Oh, okay.
That's true. There is quite a lot of film history that is just lost.
Utterly lost. Yeah. Well, I mean, early film decays.
Well,
it's highly flammable.
And also early television, because like nobody thought that it was going to be anything worth saving.
Yeah,
like
the
why?
First couple of seasons of Doctor Who.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking of, and that they had to basically animate to a soundtrack they found. So like, there's a really cool cell animated version of those shows, but because they found the original audio, because someone saved that, but they didn't save the video.
Yeah, where we do have video, it's mostly because the show got sent to other countries, and somebody there actually kept the reels.
Yeah, I mean, the same is true of early recorded music, which was a novelty. I mean, even though music was well understood as an art form before we had any ability to capture and record it, early recorded music also, not only is it next to impossible to find, most of it's decayed beyond being something that you can actually listen to.
Yeah, so at least in this case, the data is there. It's a matter of, maybe not having hardware that quite runs it right.
Well, and the games that are probably just lost to history are the games like during that era of the pre-CD era of a bajillion floppy disks to install a game.
Mm-hmm. And it's why I don't get really worked up about game remakes. Because, like, sure, there's the argument of, they're just re-releasing this game as a cash-in. But they're usually games that are, or they're very frequently games that are important as far as shaping the gaming history.
I think Kingdom Hearts is a prime example of that that's happening again, where the PS2 games were ported to PS3. PS3 version is no longer made, obviously, and they're porting them to PS4 so that game will always, in essence, be available for someone to play.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't exist in digital forms, like, thanks, Disney.
But it does mean that you lose stuff like Tron, stuff like Call of Cthulhu in these transitions.
Right. And probably the answer is to try and build a machine that'll still run these on the hardware that was intended for, but even then, like, where the hell are you going to find something that's going to run, like Windows 98, for example?
Well, and it's not even touching games that are themselves living, changing worlds, which, we've all heard people complaining about having vanilla Warcraft servers and, things like that. I mean, these are also chunks of gaming history that are essentially lost.
I don't necessarily think that they're lost. I think that they're just turning into history as opposed to being something you can load up at any time.
Well, and honestly,
I feel like that is a difference when you think of other media that we do have recorded. You can go back and re-experience that in the same way anytime that you choose.
Can you?
I can go back and reread any book that I have ever read, and it will not be an identical experience, but the words are all still there and the same.
Yeah, and I agree, but you can't recreate the context within which you were experiencing that book.
I mean, true, but I'm not asking anyone to recreate the context of a book or a movie or a game, but there are certainly games that I can no longer play for various reasons that I'd still like to.
Yeah.
And World of Warcraft is a hard one for that because...
I mean, MMOs are a different beast because part of the experience is having other people around, for sure. But it's a little bit more food for thought, and I'm certainly not in the strident we must have a WoW vanilla server camp or anything like that, although I would totally enjoy it. But it's just it's another aspect of gaming history that is transient.
Well, I feel like there's not really an archival perspective that's happening at the game companies. And a prime example is, okay, so you were talking about Vanilla WoW. Well, there was a push to bring back something in EverQuest 2 that was there at the release, but they eventually got rid of, the Isle of Refuge. Like, it was this weird starter zone you got dumped onto originally, and people really wanted it back, like, from a standpoint of, this is something that I remember fondly, like, I would like to have the option of taking my characters through it. And the problem was that yes, they still had the zone file, like the physical topography of the zone. Nobody had any of the data entries that made up the quests or the spawns or the loot that came from there. And they tried to recreate it as best they could, but it's just a different experience. Like, it's not quite the same, because not only do you have to back up like the physical patch version and the files and the code that happened at that moment, but you also have to back up the database and the quests and all that stuff that's associated with, and I realize, quests are just entries in database, but like, that is a snapshot in time that is super hard to restore back to. Like, it's a lot of moving parts, and nobody really set forth thinking, oh, hey, we might need to roll back to a previous version of this. And while you probably can from a code perspective, you can't from the data structure that wrote on top of. So I think just fundamentally, there's, especially when it comes to online gaming, there's just things that are gone forever. Like, we can't ever return unless someone painstakingly tries to recreate it.
Well, and even then, it'll never be exactly the same.
Right.
Yeah, and I do know that there are people who are interested in the process of games archiving, and it's not a huge following right now, but like, there are people who are trying to make sure that the experiences persist. And like, as I played through this game, and as I remembered how much fun I had with it the first time and how frustrating it was this time, it kind of makes me appreciate that process a bit more.
It's one of those things where I'm frustrated that there's such an unfortunate animosity between the game development industry and games academia, because games academia is the perfect place for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But its relationship with the industry proper is so toxic that the kind of collaboration that would need to happen just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Well, and I've actually, read some articles on trying to archive PC gaming. And the big problem that they run into is just simple, like, hardware compatibility. Like, nobody makes some of this hardware anymore. And getting something that's close and that would function well enough to really be able to run it is a huge problem. And there's a lot of weird, especially like in arcade games, there's some weird stuff that happened during the early, like the era of mingling PC technology with arcade cabinets. And I'm thinking Killer Instinct. It was like one of the first games that had hard drives in it. And it was written and coded for very specific, like, Seagate hard drives. Had to be, certain volume size, certain, speed, and you just can't find that hardware anymore. Like, it was rare and super custom at the time, and it simply doesn't exist.
Yeah, it makes me think of games that use clock speed, like CPU clock speed, as for all sorts of calculations, and they're barely functional on a machine. If they're functional at all,
you basically have to run them. Even if you have a machine that could otherwise run them perfectly, you have to run them through an emulator just so you can dial the clock speed back to something insane.
Yeah,
like old Origin games, run into that, and then on top of that, often have their own proprietary upper memory manager that they used that simply doesn't work on modern PCs. Because this is from back in the day when you had 640K of conventional memory, and you had to, make sure you had enough of that free for the game to run in, making custom auto-exec bats and config.sys files to be able to run specific games.
Like, this one gives me my sound drivers and my mouse.
Yep.
But yeah,
those were the days.
It is, I had kind of always figured, yeah, of course, I know that the transition from like DOS to Windows was big, and so like I don't expect my DOS games to work perfectly. This is a game from 2006.
Yeah.
These are all like, these games are now starting to be like, they're starting to break down. The hardware has evolved too much. The operating systems have evolved too much. The underlying products that allow games to work have evolved too much.
Yeah, I mean, and you're always running into something like, Fallout 3 ends up behaving weird if you have too many cores in your CPU, of all things. And, it's fixable if you know what to do, but why would having too many cores be a problem?
I mean, because people coded to what they knew to exist at that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's...
I mean, this is honestly along the lines of what happened, back in Y2K. Is like when the systems that had those problems were put into place, no one in their right mind thought they would be around as long as they ended up staying.
Yeah, software development is trying to anticipate future needs in software development is an important skill to have and very, very difficult. So, I know you were having an issue getting sick. How far did you get in it, Tam?
I barely got to the end of the intro level.
Okay.
Part of what I was running into was I couldn't actually fix it with FOV, and I couldn't find anybody else talking about this issue. But when I'd loaded up and I looked to either side, the rotation of the camera distorted everything I was looking at.
Huh.
And so it was incredibly disorienting because on top of that, it was trying really hard to fit itself into despite not being a widescreen game, trying to fit itself into my widescreen monitor. And so everything kind of looked smushed from the top down, and then when I turn, it would all like skew crazily, like I was looking through a fisheye lens, but only on one axis.
What it almost looked like is that there was a bit of like almost fisheye distortion, but it was like it was turning too low. Like it wasn't turning in the center, it was like turning towards the bottom center.
Yep.
So like everything kind of flayed out on either side. And like it didn't make me sick, it just felt weird. And to me, like, for all I knew, that was just, the era of the tools that were available. Because like I didn't realize that this was a 4x3 game that was being squished to 16:9.
Well, and then it didn't help that on top of that, the game mechanics themselves were also doing things to your vision.
Yeah, because the insanity effects would do lots of vision things, and any like psychic visions you had would be in a weird fisheye thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like I wasn't entirely certain if it was intentional or not. Like I didn't know if this is just an old game and it's acting weird, or is this really what they're trying to do?
I do want to talk to Thalen because he's the only person who got this. One of my biggest complaints about this game was the let's run from room to room and lock and bolt doors to slow down pursuers.
Oh, the escape from the hotel?
Yes.
that took me a few tries.
Yes.
It was another one of those where if anything goes wrong at any point during it, you have to start over at the very beginning.
It's got an unskippable cutscene right before it. Oh,
do all these things by road. It's like, okay, I need to go through the door. I need to turn around, close the door, bolt the door, run over here, push this shelf.
Yup. Push this bookcase in front of this door so people can't get in until they bash it down. And oh my goodness, I am doing all of these things, and it's like I would rather this is so miserable. That was actually before I had heard about all of the other problems. That was when I started feeling really bad about recommending this game because I thought that was misery.
Well, your heart was in the right place. This is just a game that I don't know about you two, since you actually made it further than I did or any of the other of us did. This is definitely a game that I couldn't suggest to someone unless they can find an old Xbox and an original copy and play it that way.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. I would not recommend this PC port to anyone.
Yeah. There's I don't know that I would go so far as to not recommend it in any way whatsoever, but I would definitely put heavy warnings on any recommendation. Be like, you need to really be into Cthulhu and want to experience this story because you're going to have to push through some interesting gameplay choices.
Yeah.
And possible hardware problems.
Yeah.
And so on.
I actually really think the combat is pretty clever. The shooting's nothing to talk about, but the way you take damage is interesting. You're gonna take wounds to your head, your chest, your extremities, and then depending on what type of wound, you're gonna require different medical supplies to patch them up. You might need a bandage, you might need sutures, you might need a splint, or you might need an antidote.
And I was very happy when I discovered that apparently a wound that requires sutures, if you wait long enough, will become a wound that requires bandages.
Oh,
because you can carry twice as many bandages as you can sutures.
I didn't realize that.
And after the mad ride in the truck, escaping from Innsmouth, and getting to the cannery there, I was very low on sutures.
Yeah, I was likewise always low on sutures. Sutures are also how you can bleed out, though. Wounds that require sutures are the ways that I most frequently bled out and died.
And that may also have been partially because I was playing on the lowest difficulty setting, because I knew going in this was an old game with stealth mechanics and all this stuff, so why make it more difficult on myself?
Oh, okay. So I was playing on the second highest, the second difficulty up.
Yeah, I was having enough difficulty on Boy Scout. I don't feel any need to play it on a higher difficulty.
Sure, but it leads to some interesting tense fights where you're because healing yourself, it requires you to find a place where you could hide in a corner and actually there's an animation to bandage yourself up. And there were a couple of fights where I had to run and hide and bandage myself up and hope that the animation completed so that I could get back into the fight before people found me. And that's stuff like that is why I wanted everyone to play this game, because I think it does have some interesting mechanics worth talking about. I just don't think they are worth the problems that they cause. The rest of the game isn't worth it for the technical difficulties this game has.
I think it brings me back to the point of there is this era of FPS-ish games that tried to do a lot of interesting things that just doesn't seem to really happen anymore. Like,
yeah, it was this period of everything needs to be an every game needs to be an FPS in addition to whatever else it is.
It was the point, because it's built on one of the early it's not early Unreal, is it? Or
yeah, it might be.
Because it's one of those. There was a point where all of the first like functional gaming middleware were focused on making FPSs.
Right. I mean, that's why Vampire Bloodlines was, basically an FPS, because it was on Unreal.
Mm-hmm. Unreal became really good at...
Apparently they developed their own engine.
Oh.
Oh, they have no excuse.
Yeah. They initially used the game engine NDL NetImmerse combined with the Havoc physics engine, but later developed their own engine.
Well, I mean, there's... Even if it's not Unreal, I'm willing to bet that the people they could hire were used to making first-person shooters at the time, because that was what everyone was
certainly.
Yeah. Yo, I also see, based on this Wikipedia page, that this is from the era of overpromise and underdeliver.
Did that era ever stop?
I mean, would be a non-linear RPG type storyline with a cooperative system for up to 4 players.
No, that didn't happen.
No, it didn't. Yeah, I feel like this story would have been better served by either a Baldur's Gate style adaptation of the Call of Cthulhu system, or more likely making it a adventure game.
Yes, but unfortunately the adventure game was dead at this point.
Yep. Very, very dead. Like, if this were made now, I think it would be made as a Telltale style adventure game, and I think that could work really well.
So, I will say that I think that the first player perspective was an interesting part of this, because it allows the game to mess with your vision and your hearing and really personalize the effects of the insanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting seeing how they did the insanity effects compared with something like Eternal Darkness, where you were playing in,
third person.
Right?
Yeah, and I hear Eternal Darkness also had some really interesting insanity mechanics to it.
Oh, yeah. Well, it did all sorts of things like making you think that your controller had come unplugged, or throwing up a game end screen to be continued in, Eternal Darkness 2, things like that.
I would have to... I've never actually played Eternal Darkness, and I know that was mentioned to me by a couple of you during this. It's another game that I wonder if I can actually even play anymore.
If you can find a way to play it, you can play it.
Yeah. It's a legitimately good game.
Do you have a GameCube?
That's the thing. It's a game for the GameCube that has no business being on the GameCube.
Yeah, so...
There were a lot of those, though, which is weird.
Here's another thing, back to the, games archival story. I can, for the most part, find an SNES or an NES and in a store, and those have lasted pretty well for almost 30 years. Xbox One, or not Xbox One, the original Xbox, that had a shelf life of 5 years.
Because it had both a CD drive of some sort and a hard drive. And those components just get trashed. Parts.
Yeah, and so finding I kind of worry about GameCube as well, because my GameCube also died on me.
I mean, I think Nintendo was the one console maker that actually successfully did full backward compatibility, so you could get a Wii.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Yep.
I have maybe a Wii that works.
You need a GameCube memory card and a GameCube controller.
I probably have those.
As far as the actual console,
are not hard to get.
Yeah, and the good news is I live in Seattle, so there's actually a retro game place where you can go and get all of these consoles. But I do worry about the PS1 era and the Xbox, those consoles lasting up.
Well, okay, so
I'm
honestly,
PS2. I had to have that thing repaired, I think 3 times, and they won't repair them anymore. So if it breaks again, it's just done.
I feel like the life expectancy of these titles is going to be based on emulation. Like, PS1 emulation's pretty good. PS2 emulation's pretty good. I have no clue about Xbox emulation because I never owned an Xbox, so I don't have any nostalgia about that sort of stuff. But like, I feel like that's probably what's going to happen, is like emulation will save these things for the long run. I mean, that's how I can play Killer Instinct Arcade. Someone managed to rip the hard drive images and it works. Like, it works great. And someone built a custom emulator around it. Because otherwise these games just aren't going to function anymore. Like, because the thing is there are ways to easily create something that is compatible for a Nintendo game or a Super Nintendo game, so you can have these Retron type consoles that will play those cartridge games. I don't see anybody is ever going to make a PS1 compatible architecture that, you know, you can play your PlayStation games on, just because there's too many moving parts at that point. Like, it is too complicated. From anything from PS1 onwards is just too complicated to clone new hardware.
Interesting. Because old hardware was so simple, it's easier to replicate it.
Yeah, it was just a circuit board that read in memory off of the cartridge and then did things. So they just had to replicate it, like the few chips that were on that board. But now, like, there are custom processors for this and there are custom processors for that, and then you have to figure out the DRM on the CD, which is a huge part of it. Like, actually getting it to read. Like, okay, so PlayStation era games are really weird because there are built-in errors into every CD. So, like, there are literal parts on the disc that are bad writes, but there are bad writes in a specific way with a specific checksum, and a combination of these bad areas on a CD equates to this game passes and we can play it. So, like, you would have to figure out not only how to create a CD-ROM that can read a PS1 game, but a CD-ROM that can read a PS1 game and handle these errors that no modern CD-ROM will actually read. Like, it will just see it as an error and it will skip over it.
It was early copy protection.
But like, a lot of those consoles had stuff like that built in, so it was a hardware lockout, but it was also like media lockout to where this won't work. And that's a lot of the reasons why it's difficult for people to do backwards compatibility on these games, because you have to then build in all of this logic into your new system that can learn how to determine whether or not this is a valid disc. So yeah, I mean, it's basically, once you left cartridges, it became a mess. And especially since, like, CD-ROM technology evolved so fast. And I believe even like some of those early things, it wasn't just that the copy errors had to be in the certain places. You needed a specific speed that it was being read at for them to actually work. So I don't know. Like,
it's the kind of thing
it's a mess.
You can only do when you know, because they could do that because they knew that this would be played on a console with these specs.
Yeah.
You know, every PS1 worked the same way, had the same hardware inside it. Can't do that with PC.
And to Grace's point earlier, it means that these things aren't replicable. Like, you can't go and make what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. You can't get the same experience without replicating really old hardware.
I mean, and that's why emulation is probably the best hope, because instead of just porting, it's emulating what this chip does and what this chip does and what this chip does to finally give you a blended experience. It's close, but never quite the same. I mean, like, in college, I started messing around with my first Super Nintendo emulators. So that was 1996-ish, and they still don't have some games perfectly emulated. and there have been people working on those games that entire time.
Yeah, emulation is a really hard problem to solve.
Which is, I mean, probably a good thing because it means it's less of an immediate threat to get game publishers. I don't know. I always felt a little weird about emulation just because the correlation between it and piracy.
I mean, that's a weird area that I don't know if we're ever going to solve, though. Because, like, the folks that dedicate all these hours to build emulators, they're not doing it just to get around buying a game. They're, you know, honestly, like, they're the ones that are going to be preserving these games for the long haul.
That's how I played Final Fantasy V back in the day, because, it was with an unofficial translation as a ROM on an emulator, because it didn't get brought over here. And I've absolutely bought it, multiple versions of it, since they officially published it here. But I literally didn't have that option back in the day. So yeah, emulator.
Yeah, I mean, and there are thousands upon thousands of games that will never see a localization. And, translation packs that are fan translated are always an interesting way to be able to play those games. But I feel like we have veered far off topic.
I mean, kind of. This is kind of the topic that
became of the show.
That became of playing this game, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think this was a good game. It's just not aged. It's not aged well in a different way than I normally mean.
And I guess I wish there was something like Good Old Games that did more than just, give you custom DOSBox settings. I mean, because ultimately that's most of what Good Old Games does, is figure out these are the settings you should play it on.
Yeah.
And now you install the game, and here's the correct settings, and go. I wish there was a way that someone was actually going out and restoring these games to playability. And like, just because it's on Steam doesn't mean it's playable. I mean, I've had so many problems with, like, Knights of the Old Republic 2, for example, and getting it to not crash. So there's like a whole era of games that, are still very much worth playing, but they're complicated.
Yeah. I would say if you have a working Xbox and you can get the original copy of this game, it's worth checking out, especially if you like Cthulhu and first-person shooters. But that's about as far as I'd recommend it.
Yeah, that's if you're willing to put some effort into it with the knowledge that even then it might not be enough to get it to work properly on your machine.
You might physically not be able to stand playing it.
Yeah. You could pick it up on Steam and, try and see how it'll work. If it won't, you can return it. So there's that. But it does sound like it's very hit or miss as to whether it'll work on the PC.
Boy, though, I wanted to shoot J. Edgar Hoover by the end of this game.
J. Edgar Hoover is a jerk. The game is very accurate in that respect.
That was another interesting thing that playing this game made me think of, because you do spend a decent amount of time committed in Arkham Asylum. Was Arkham Asylum from H.P. Lovecraft what influenced Arkham Asylum in Batman?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting. I didn't realize there was that much, like, crossover between Lovecraft and, like, early comics.
Yeah, you'll see little things like that, here and there pop up in places, and yeah, definitely the Arkham Asylum from Batman, they took the name directly from Lovecraft. And in the years since, like, there have been stories. I mean, the Arkham Asylum video game, like, there's some stuff going on that kind of leans towards that feel. If you find the stuff related to what's going on with the warden and everything.
Well, do we have any final thoughts before we start to wrap things up, since it sounds like we're starting to slow down the discussion a little bit?
I'm sorry I made this the game of the month.
I'm sorry that I didn't get to keep playing it, because it seemed like a game that would be enjoyable if it were playable.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. Like, I don't know that I would have necessarily enjoyed it, because this is very much not my type of game, and I don't really like the Cthulhu mythos very much. But I probably would have had interesting stuff to say if I'd been able to play it.
I'm largely
this game.
I'm largely just annoyed that I couldn't figure out a combination of switches to make it run. Because, like, this is absolutely in my wheelhouse. I love Lovecraft. I love all of the derivations of Lovecraft that are actually written by other people. Like, I even like the Brian Lumley Lovecraft stuff. So yeah, like, this was definitely in my wheelhouse, but it just didn't function. And I'm kind of wondering if, like, Evil Within might be a more modern spin on this game, just based on some of the things that I've seen from it. Also published by Bethesda.
Yeah.
Okay, I believe the next pick is Grace. Am I correct?
As far as I know.
Okay.
I think that's right.
So what are we playing? Because at this point, like, this might as well just be the December game.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and so this game is a little bit of a selfish pick for me. Because I suspect that almost everyone but me has already played this game, but I would really, one, like to make myself play it, and two, like to talk about it, and it is timely because the 20th anniversary of Diablo is coming up, and I would like to play Diablo 2.
I have never played Diablo 2, I don't think.
Wow.
So it's another blast from
the
past, right? This game was, I think, put out in 2000, but I have been playing a little of it, and it is still functional and still supported, actually. It's still receiving patches from Blizzard within the last, like, 6 months or something. So anyway, that is my pick for November, December.
I have not played it in a very long time, so it will be interesting. I pretty much always played the Druid once the Lord of Destruction expansion came out, because the Druid felt like the best of, everything I liked about the Barbarian, plus a bunch of other stuff. So it'll be interesting.
I don't think I've ever played this game.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping, like, I knew probably a lot of people played the original Diablo, and I did, and this is one that I missed it when it was released, and I never got around to it. And there's also the whole story of Diablo and when it's good and when it's really terrible that I think might be fun to talk about. So yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm getting ready for this story.
It actually has like a reasonable story from what I remember.
I mean, everything that I've heard about it is that it has a fairly ridiculous story even for Diablo, so I'm kind of looking forward to it.
I mean, for anyone who has forgotten, it picks up many years after the first Diablo with, which the first one having ended with the main character shoving Diablo's gem into his forehead and wandering off.
Yes.
So this picks up with, after that.
What's the best way to, contain a demon is to become a unicorn.
This makes perfect sense.
Okay, well, this is not exactly how I had hoped this show would go. I had hoped we would all play, but, this is what happens when you play old games.
I think we had a very good discussion.
Yeah.
This is kind of the discussion I wanted to have after I played this game. At least this time around.
Yeah.
It also reminds me that sometimes nostalgia is not very effective.
Well, if nothing else, playing this has made me want to go back and reread a bunch of Cthulhu stuff. So
yeah, I definitely want to at least reread Shadows over Innsmouth, because it's been a while. Like, it's probably been since high school that I last read it.
That and Shadow Out of Time in particular, I'm wanting to reread now.
Yeah, the Yithian element. When I first played this, I didn't know what a Yithian was. It makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah, the Great Race are pretty cool.
Anyway, so in theory, we will be playing Diablo 2 for the rest of November and December, since, like, we're halfway through November already.
Yay! Also, December's a weird month.
December's a weird month,
Yep.
so, like, in theory, this is probably a good thing. Like, this is a 2-monther. Didn't we do a 2-monther for November and December? Was that Fallout 4?
Fallout 4.
Yep.
Yeah, so maybe that works well. Anyway, hopefully you guys out there will enjoy the discussion, especially about, archival of games that we still love. Anyway, We will see you next week for a normal show. Good night.
Bye.
Night.
Good night.